Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, August 13th, 2024. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden visit Tulane University in New Orleans to announce more federal grants for the president's signature Cancer Moonshot initiative. The money will go towards creating new tools for removing cancerous tumors. Democratic vice presidential nominee, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, speaks to the largest union of U.S. public employees holding their annual convention in Los Angeles. A supporter of Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump, former acting director of national intelligence Richard Grennell, sizes up the presidential race this year. Secret Service gives a security update for the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, which starts next week, plus the latest on Iran's threats to retaliate militarily against Israel and Ukraine's military advance into Russian territory. We'll hear from the Pentagon, the State Department, and the United Nations. Story from USA Today. President Joe Biden will announce Tuesday he is putting $150 million in new federal funding towards developing technology to better help surgeons successfully remove cancerous tumors, the White House said. The award, to be announced during a visit to New Orleans, is the latest infusion of cash in Biden's Cancer Moonshot, a program spearheaded by the president and the First Lady that aims to reduce the U.S. cancer death rate by at least half by 2047. Nearly 2 million Americans are diagnosed with solid tumors each year, and surgical removal is often the first step in their treatment, the White House said. Next-generation microscopes and imaging technology hope to make these surgeries more effective, reducing the need for repeat surgeries and decreasing the damage to healthy tissue, ultimately saving and extending lives, the White House said. That was the preview article from USA Today. President Biden was joined at Tulane by the First Lady Jill Biden. The grants are being made through their ARPA-H program, Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. First, the First Lady.
You know, it's great to be back in New Orleans, where scientists and researchers are at the forefront in this fight against cancer. And whenever I meet with cancer researchers and scientists, one thing always stands out. It's their relentless optimism. They hear words like never and think, maybe not yet, but one day soon. As president, Joe has invested in that resolve, because that's what turns into the miracle that patients and their families are praying for. Of all the things that cancer steals from us, strength, mobility, comfort, time is the cruelest. For every night spent in the hospital, there's a lost chance to learn maybe the key ingredient in a secret family recipe. For every repeat operation to cut out more cancerous tissue, there's a missed moment to show our kids how to bait a fishing hook on a hot summer day by the lake. Patients and their families don't have time to spare. Joe created ARPA-H, the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, to invest in the most innovative research that the government wasn't funding before. And it was too risky for the private sector, but could be life-changing and life-saving. And ARPA-H doesn't just fund those projects. It puts them on this fast track to reach patients, answering hopeful prayers and delivering more of that precious gift of time. Cancer touches us all. When Joe and I lost our son to brain cancer, we decided to turn our pain into purpose. We wanted to help families like ours so that they won't have to experience this terrible loss.
First Lady Jill Biden at Tulane University in New Orleans with her husband, President Joe Biden.
When Jill and I reignited the Cancer Moonshot in our administration, we were determined to launch this new outfit called ARPA-H, and that's what we did. Imagine using mRNA vaccines to kill cancer cells. Imagine tackling exactly how a tumor changes over time so doctors can adapt treatments and stay ahead of the cancer as it changes. Imagine applying artificial intelligence to identify existing drugs that can target scientific mutations in rare cancers. Imagine clinical trials that bring innovation to all communities. The nationwide data system allows us to learn from the experience of more patients and more docs around the world and here in the United States. And it breaks down the research silos. This is not a thing we want to keep information, we want to share it. All of these are being pushed through by ARPA-H, which has so far committed more than $400 million to ending cancer as we know it. And a year ago, ARPA-H set its sights on a big idea, calling on researchers and innovators to pioneer new techniques and technologies to make cancer removal more precise, accurate, and successful. Imagine cancer surgery that removes all the tumor the first time without harming healthy cells. Compare that to today. As all of you know, cancer surgery is an incredibly challenging procedure. It takes the best surgeons in the world, and it takes its toll on families. As Jill said, it steals time. It steals away hope. Our family knows the feeling as many of you do. The surgery happens, then you have to wait a week or more to see if the tumor was removed fully. That anxiety waiting and the unknown is just excruciating. But today, we're a step closer to relieving that burden on patients and families. Today, we're announcing $150 million ARPA-H funding for some of the nation's cutting-edge cancer research institutions. That includes right here at Tulane University.
President Joe Biden at Tulane in New Orleans. An article from Forbes reads the grantees include researchers at Tulane, up to $22.9 million, Texas's Rice University, $18 million, and the University of Washington, $21.1 million, who are working to develop more advanced imaging systems. Other grantees include Johns Hopkins University, University of California, San Francisco, and the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, who are working on developing advanced microscopes, and Dartmouth College and Cision Vision, who are creating ways to help minimize damage to a patient's blood vessels and nerves during surgery. That was from Forbes magazine. We learned Monday that the conservative U.S. House Freedom Caucus says it wants a short-term fiscal year 2025 government funding bill to avoid a shutdown after September 30th, when the new fiscal year will begin, instead of an omnibus spending bill that would cover the full fiscal year. And also, the short-term bill, they say, should go into 2025 to, quote, ensure Democrats cannot undermine President Trump's second term with a lame duck omnibus in December. And also, they would like to include a bill in the short-term bill to require proof of U.S. citizenship to register to vote. Congressman Scott Perry, Republican from Pennsylvania, a former Freedom Caucus chair, spoke about this on the R.J. Harris radio show, WLS, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
The end of September, R.J., is the end of the federal fiscal year. And, of course, the Senate has done nothing to prepare for the spending impasse that we have. The House has passed half the bills, but we still have half to do. The Democrats won't help. The only time they'll help with spending is if you're spending more. So they're not interested in reducing any of what's causing this $35 trillion in debt we have, and we'll be at 36 here before the end of the year. Every 100 days, we add another $1 trillion onto it. And so that's coming at the end of September. And what people like me are saying is, first of all, no more omnibus from Chuck Schumer, where they throw everything in it, like the grant program you talked about originally. And if you don't vote for it, you're accused of shutting down the government. We don't want to do that. And we're also saying when we do the spending package in September, whatever it is, let's put the SAVE Act on it. If you don't know what the SAVE Act is, it's passed by the House of Representatives, and it says that if you're going to vote in the United States and you're going to vote in the states or territories, you must be an American citizen. Now, the Democrats do not want to. They wouldn't vote for it. They don't want to have that requirement. And, of course, it already generally is a requirement, but the states don't often enforce it. They enforce it by having the person that signs their voter registration form vouch for themselves. That's how it's enforced. But we're saying that you have to prove American citizenship if you're going to vote in this presidential election. That's essentially what the SAVE Act does. And we're saying that should be passed in September, along with a reasonable spending bill that all sides have come to that actually reduces this runaway spending at the federal level. That's what I'm working on right now.
Congressman Scott Perry, Republican from Pennsylvania, on WLS Radio, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The House, before they went on August break, passed 5 of the 12 annual spending bills. The Senate approved none, although the bills did come out of the Senate Appropriations Committee, just not passing the full Senate. New fiscal year begins October 1st. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz spoke today at the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Labor Union Convention in Los Angeles, his first solo campaign event since he was named Democratic vice presidential running mate by the presidential nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris. This is the 46th annual AFSCME convention. The theme this year, they say, is Fearless. AFSCME has about 1.3 million members. Here's Governor Walz.
We all understand it in here. You've heard me say this. I know I'm preaching to the choir a little bit today, but the choir needs to sing. The choir needs to sing. And just so you know who's not in the choir, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, they see the world very differently than we do. The only thing those two guys knows about working people is how to work to take advantage of them. That's what they know about it. Every single chance they've gotten, they've waged war on workers and their ability to collectively bargain to take that away from them. All we're asking for is better wages, better benefits, better lives, and dignity in the work that we do. There's a great bill in Congress, should be the easiest vote you've ever taken, the PRO Act. Make it easier to form a union and bargain. Allow people to have the freedom to make a choice. Allow them to be able to do that. They also oppose the Public Service Freedom to Negotiate Act, which would require states to bargain with their employees. Look, if you're living in a state where you get to do those things, it's one thing. But our family and our neighbors and our fellow Americans are living in states where they don't have that. So when it comes to these so-called right-to-work laws that deprive us of the right to be able to form unions, fund what we need, Trump has said he supports right to work 100%. I saw our friend Sean Fain at the UAW had a name for that. He called him a scab, just to be clear. That's not name calling, it's an observation and fact, just to be clear. So, you know, you can tell a lot about people in their personal lives. He spent a decade stiffing service workers from dishwashers, waiters, and carpenters on his own properties to enrich himself. As president, he cut overtime benefits for millions of workers, and he opposed any effort to raise the minimum wage. That's all you need to know. You don't have to ask twice. We know who they are. A guy who goes to Mar-a-Lago, and this is a direct quote, he sits there and tells his friends, "You're rich as hell and we're going to cut your taxes." I believe him when he says that. But he also turns around and tells workers their wages are too high. I keep bringing this up. Who do you know who's asking to cut taxes on billionaires while stiffing working people? I don't know anybody. And I'll tell you what, I think there's a lot of people think that they're on his side or voting for him, that when you put it to them like that, they start thinking things differently. This is where we need to talk to our neighbors. We need to engage. And I'll tell you, his running mate, I don't know if that was a value add to this campaign or not, but he's one of 4 senators, 4, that has never cast a vote on a pro-worker bill in his life. Not once. A stop clock's right twice a day. This guy can't get it right once. Not once for workers.
Governor Tim Walz, Democrat from Minnesota, the Democratic vice presidential nominee, speaking today at the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Labor Union annual convention in Los Angeles. He also spoke about attacks from the Republican vice presidential nominee, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, on his military record. Governor Walz served in the Army National Guard, and Senator Vance has suggested that he has been insincere about his background, saying that he served in Iraq when he was asked to, while Walz, quote, dropped out of the Army to avoid doing so. Governor Walz saying today, "I'm damn proud of my service to this country. I firmly believe you should never denigrate another person's service record. To anyone brave enough to put on that uniform for our great country, including my opponent, I have just a few simple words. Thank you for your service and sacrifice." You can find Governor Walz's full speech at our video library at cspan.org. Story from Reuters: the United Auto Workers Union said on Tuesday it's filed charges with the National Labor Relations Board against Donald Trump and Tesla CEO Elon Musk over attempts to threaten and intimidate workers. The action came after Musk and Trump held a 2-hour conversation on social media on Monday night on the platform X that Musk owns, during which Trump complimented Musk's ability to cut costs by saying he would not tolerate workers going on strike. And former President Trump wrote today on his Truth Social platform, "I spent 2.5 hours last night talking to Elon, a fantastic guy, getting all-time record views and hits, and all the fake news wants to report is that the servers crashed because of the tremendous volume, and the show opened a little late. What they should be reporting was the incredible number of people that were listening. I absolutely hate the fake news media. So bad for our country." That conversation between Musk and Trump was delayed for more than a half hour after there were technical issues. Musk posted on X during the delay that they were going through a massive DDoS, denial of service attack targeting the platform. At its peak, X Spaces says that the chat between Trump and Musk hit more than 1 million listeners. Richard Grennell is a former acting director of national intelligence and ambassador to Germany during the Trump administration. Today, he was interviewed at an EU-US forum in Vienna, Austria, and asked how he sees the race for president between former Republican President Donald Trump, the GOP nominee this year, and Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee.
I'm certainly not saying we are absolutely going to win. I think we are. I think that the mechanics are there, but it's a long road to get there. And obviously it goes through Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and so we've got a lot of states to win. In terms of just like handicapping it, I'd rather be us than them. And one of the reasons why is that I think the American people now know, they feel the difference between the Trump administration and the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration. They see a massive war in Europe. They see a massive war in the Middle East. They see our open borders. They see the numbers of illegal immigrants that have crossed into our country. And more importantly, I think they feel the effects of inflation every single week when they put gas in their car, when they buy groceries. I can't tell you how many people say to me constantly, I'm voting just on the grocery issue alone. When you go to the grocery store, it's shocking. Now look, I can afford it, but I'm shocked when I go through and I see just how much things are. It wasn't like that under President Trump. And so people feel that, and the election was incredibly close last time. So I think that the public has already decided that they would rather have closed borders, no wars, and cheaper gas and groceries. And so I tend to think it's almost over, to be honest. I feel like people have seen the effects of both presidents. And look, this is a very unique case in that we're not talking about a politician promising what they might do in the future, and then the media saying, oh, this would be great, and having economists say, yeah, this would work. It's literally the Vice President of the United States who, by her own account, was the last person to leave the room on every big decision with Joe Biden. And so the Joe Biden-Kamala Harris team, we see what they've given us, and we also know what President Trump gave us.
Richard Grennell, former acting director of national intelligence and former ambassador to Germany during the Donald Trump administration, speaking today at the European Union United States Forum held in Vienna, Austria. He was later identified in this discussion as an informal advisor to the Donald Trump presidential campaign. Associated Press reporting Monday night a judge has ruled that independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s name should not appear on New York's ballot, saying that he falsely claimed a New York residence on nominating petitions despite living in California. The scion of the famed Democratic political dynasty vowed to appeal, dismissing the ruling as partisan. If the judge's decision is upheld, it would not only keep Kennedy off the ballot in New York, but could also lead to challenges in other states where he used an address in New York City's suburbs to gather signatures. Kennedy said in a statement The Democrats are showing contempt for democracy. They aren't confident they can win at the ballot box, so they are trying to stop voters from having a choice. We will appeal, and we will win. The ruling came after a North Carolina judge decided earlier Monday that Kennedy can remain on that state's ballot following a separate challenge on different grounds. That was reporting from Associated Press Monday night. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. spoke about the New York ballot access trial with WRGB CBS Albany on Friday after he testified.
After Ross Perot ran, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party wanted to make sure that an independent could never run again. So they made signature thresholds almost insurmountable. And New York has some of the toughest signature thresholds. You need to get 45,000 signatures or 47,000 signatures in 45 days. We ended up getting 150,000 signatures. So we had more than enough to get on the ballot. And the Democratic Party, the DNC, is trying to keep me off the ballot in all 50 states. We now have enough signatures to get on the ballot in every state, something that we were told could never happen. We've collected over 1 million signatures, more than any presidential campaign in history. Oh, there's 1 million people, including 150,000 in New York, that have signed a petition asking that I be on the ballot. The DNC is trying to keep me off the ballot, and they're doing that now by saying I'm not really from New York State. Yeah. I've lived in New York State since I was 10 years old, since 1964. My father ran for Senate that year. He was also, ironically, also called a carpetbagger. In other words, that he didn't really live in New York State. So 60 years later, now I'm running and I'm being told I don't live in New York State. My driver's license here, I vote in this state. My car is registered here. My law license is in this state, not California. My law office is in this state. I pay income tax in this state. Most importantly, you have to put the same domicile on every state in the country, so on all 50 states. And some of those states say your domicile has to be the place where you vote. I've never voted any place else in New York. I received legal advice. I had to name New York as the state. And, we have the best ballot access attorney in the country, and he said this is the only way to do it. So, I'm being accused of deceiving people about my domicile, but I took legal advice, and I was told you're going to be sued whether you claim Massachusetts where you have a house, California where you have a house, or New York where you have a house, and the only place legally that you can claim is New York.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., independent presidential candidate, in an interview on Friday on the CBS TV affiliate in Albany, New York. After he testified in the New York ballot access case, a judge ruled Monday night that Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s name should not appear on the ballot. And as you heard him say, he'll appeal the ruling. The case was brought by Clear Choice PAC, which is led by supporters of President Biden. A Newsweek article reads, a fight by Joe Biden allies to keep Robert F. Kennedy Jr. off the ballot could backfire on the Democratic presidential campaign by delivering more votes for Republican Donald Trump than Kamala Harris, according to some poll indications. This is Washington Today. From Fox News, a federal judge in Chicago handed anti-Israel protest groups a loss this week, rejecting their request for more space to protest the Gaza counteroffensive outside the Democratic National Convention next week. 4 groups seeking to organize protests: the Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, the Anti-War Committee, Students for a Democratic Society at UJC, and U.S. Palestinian Community Network asked for parade permits, giving them authorization to march over an expanded area. A judge shut them down this week, rejecting their claim that the city's preferred protest route violates their First Amendment rights. That was from Fox News. There was a Democratic Convention Security and Safety News Conference today in Chicago. Derek Meyer is the Secret Service Deputy Special Agent in charge of the Chicago Field Office.
Less than a week from now, the nation's attention will focus on the great city of Chicago as it hosts the 2024 Democratic National Convention. Planning for this convention has been going on for well over a year. That planning, which required the help of our federal, state, and local partners, has included thousands of hours of analyzing, training, and working with the public to develop a comprehensive safety plan that was released last month. The convention has been designated a national special security event. That delegation allows for a whole-of-government approach. It means that the federal government has its full complement of resources and works with its state and local partners to ensure a safe and secure environment for residents, delegates, and the entire city of Chicago as the DNC opens on Monday. I want to stress there is no better partner the Secret Service could have than the city of Chicago and its world-class police department. Superintendent Snelling is a tremendous partner, and CPD is the best in the world. I'm proud to tell you we are ready. While the DNC is obviously a huge event, Chicago has a proven track record when it comes to putting on huge events. Just this summer, Chicago has brilliantly hosted NASCAR, Lollapalooza, and the Air and Water Show this past weekend. The Secret Service also has a proven track record in coordinating security for national special security events. The DNC marks the 79th NSSE.
Derek Meyer, Secret Service Deputy Special Agent in Charge, Chicago Field Office, at today's news conference in Chicago. He mentioned the Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling, also at the news conference, and they answered reporters' questions about security preparations.
One of the apparent breakdowns from the events in Butler, Pennsylvania was a lack of visuals or blind spots that occurred at that incident. Can you talk about what role the pod cameras will play for the city of Chicago and how many of those have been under repair recently?
So what I can tell you about the way the pod cameras are used, we use them all across the city in every district. So our ATC rooms, our area technology teams, along with our SDSC rooms in the district, we can look at every location, almost every location within the district where we know there's a possibility that something can come up. But what I can tell you is PSA is working on camera repairs and installations if necessary. So these installations have been going on for quite some time, and they continue to do that.
Are there areas of under repair still, or areas of your concern?
Well, that's across the city. And the locations that you're specifically talking about, we have security measures around those locations to ensure that we don't have a major incident like that occur.
Superintendent, if I can follow up on that and just clarify, because you mentioned PSA, and I know it's kind of their bailiwick and not yours, but have you asked for, or has there been some coordination to put additional cameras up around the United Center to monitor areas where protesters may be going, or around the perimeter to help you, give you, eyes and ears, if you will, on locations that maybe you didn't have them before?
Well, like I said, I'm not going to go into every little detail about what's going on around that location. We have eyes and ears on everything that we possibly can in that location. And we're working with our federal partners to make sure, to ensure that we don't have a major incident occur in that area.
If I could follow up, just a question for the Secret Service representative, Mr. Meyer. What do you say to concerns that people might have about, the security lapses that happened in Pennsylvania that allowed former President Trump to be shot? If people have questions about, is the Secret Service really ready and have everything covered, were there lessons that were learned from that have put you guys on a greater sense of making sure we have everything covered?
We talk about that all the time. If you're not learning and trying to be innovative and creative in law enforcement, you're not doing your job. So obviously all of us in law enforcement are trying to get better every day. But as far as comparing Butler to a national special security event, you can't compare it. This is a whole of government approach. We've been planning for this convention for well over a year, so we can't compare the two.
Derek Meyer, Secret Service Deputy Special Agent in Charge, Chicago Field Office, joined by the Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling at a news conference today in Chicago. You heard reference to pod cameras, that's police observation device. New York Times has an article that thousands of demonstrators are expected in the streets and the parks of Chicago for next week's Democratic National Convention, most of them to protest the U.S. role in the war in Gaza. But officials are concerned about the potential for more embarrassing spectacle, primetime disruptions Inside the arena itself, about 30 uncommitted delegates representing the Democratic primary voters who oppose President Biden, largely over what they see as his tilt toward Israel in the brutal war launched after the Hamas attacks last October, will have unfettered access to make their voices heard. That from the New York Times. Washington Today continues in a moment.
C-SPAN, where history unfolds daily. In 1979, C-SPAN was created as a public service by America's cable television companies. And today, we continue to take you to Congress and other public policy events in Washington, D.C. and around the country. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Only a ceasefire deal in Gaza stemming from hope for talks this week, writes Reuters, would hold Iran back from direct retaliation against Israel for the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh on its soil, 3 senior Iranian officials said. Iran has vowed a severe response to Haniyeh's killing, which took place as he visited Tehran late last month, and which it blamed on Israel. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied its involvement. The U.S. Navy has deployed warships and a submarine to the Middle East to bolster Israeli defenses. That was the story today from Reuters. The Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder held a news conference at the Pentagon and got questions about the rising tensions.
Under what circumstances would U.S. forces launch an attack on Iran?
So look, our focus is on de-escalating the situation. We have put these additional capabilities into the region to enable us, as I highlighted, to protect our forces, but also to support the defense of Israel should it be attacked. I'm not going to speculate or get into hypotheticals on when and if Iran launches an attack or one of their proxies launches an attack. Their public comments have been very clear, so we need to take those seriously. But our focus is on de-escalating tensions, working on enabling that ceasefire and getting these hostages returned home.
But isn't it important at this critical time in history that you send a very clear signal to Iran that if they launch a major attack on Israel and or its proxies, the U.S. military will attack Iran? Don't you need to send a clear signal about what Iran, if they do it, if they cross it, you will attack them?
I think we are sending an extremely clear signal, which is that we are going to support the defense of Israel as evidenced by the capabilities that, one, we already retain in the region, and two, the additional capabilities that we're flowing into the CENTCOM and EUCOM AOR.
Real quick on Lincoln. The Secretary has ordered Lincoln to the Middle East twice now in over 10 days. The first time was 2 days after the Hamas leader was killed outside in Tehran. The second time was on Sunday, as you mentioned. Where was the sense of urgency for Lincoln to get to the Middle East? Lincoln was just doing an exercise with the Italian Navy on Friday. If it was so urgent for Lincoln to get to the Middle East, why did you need the second set of orders?
Well, Lucas, as a former naval officer yourself, you understand the complexities and intricacies associated with managements of large fleets around the world. And the bottom line is, again, as evidenced by the capabilities that we are surging into the region, we will have a variety of capacity and capability to respond to various contingencies. Again, the focus is on de-escalating the situation, protecting our forces, and supporting the defense of Israel. And we'll continue. And this is not a Lucas Tomlinson press conference, so I'm going to go over to Idris.
If you do this, launch this major attack, the U.S. military will strike back. Why can't you just clearly say that?
I think we've been very clear that we're going to support the defense of Israel, and I'm not going to speculate about potential future attacks by Iran.
The Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder, Air Force Major General, at today's Pentagon news conference. Stars and Stripes has an article. Several U.S. and coalition personnel suffered minor injuries in a drone attack Friday in Syria as more American forces move into the Middle East in anticipation of strikes by Iran and its proxy militias. The Pentagon said. General Pat Ryder said Monday that personnel were treated for minor injuries such as smoke inhalation, but no serious injuries were reported. The State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel was asked at his news conference today about a New York Times article that reads, "For weeks, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel has denied that he is trying to block a ceasefire deal in Gaza, by hardening Israel's negotiating position. Mr. Netanyahu has consistently placed all blame for the deadlocked negotiations on Hamas, even as senior members of the Israeli security establishment accused him of slowing the process himself. But in private, Mr. Netanyahu has in fact added new conditions to Israel's demands, additions that his own negotiators fear have created extra obstacles to a deal. According to unpublished documents reviewed by the New York Times that detail Israel's negotiating positions, Israel relayed a list of new stipulations in late July to American, Egyptian, and Qatari mediators that added less flexible conditions to a set of principles it had made in late May. That was from the New York Times. Here's the question about it to the State Department spokesperson, Vedant Patel.
I'm sure you saw the New York Times report today about the Israeli negotiating position, saying that some demands made in recent weeks, for example, the Philadelphia corridor, the border with Egypt, that Israel has demanded to have control of that. Do you think that both sides actually want a truce and are ready to make some compromises to get there?
So look, Sean, again, I'm just not going to get into the specifics of the negotiation process. That certainly would not be helpful from up here, and it would not helpful to a sensitive process. On whatever the reporting that is out there, Sean, I've seen those reports, and I'm certainly not going to get into alleged documents or comment on private diplomatic conversations. I'll also say that, the media says a lot of things, government officials say a lot of things. What I can say from the U.S. perspective is that we are so clearly committed to this because we think it is in the vital interest of the region. As you've heard me say, we think that a ceasefire deal has the potential to create conditions so that hostages can release, so we can see an increase in humanitarian aid, and more broadly create conditions for diplomacy to get the region out of this endless cycle of violence. And I will also just note what I said yesterday, that Prime Minister Netanyahu confirmed that his team will be at the ceasefire talks on Thursday, and that they'll be prepared to finalize the details for implementing the deal. But I'm not going to get more specific beyond that.
State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel at the State Department News Conference in Washington. From BBC News, a far-right Israeli minister has led hundreds of Jewish Israelis into Jerusalem's most contested holy site, with many defying the Israeli government's long-standing ban on Jewish prayer there. The visit by National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, known to Jews as Temple Mount, has been condemned as provocative by Palestinian leaders, as well as the UN and several Arab states. Mr. Ben-Gvir said in a video that our policy is to enable Jewish prayer, but the Israeli Prime Minister's office insisted there had been no change to the status quo agreement that allows only Muslim worship there. That was from BBC News, and video of the visit was posted online. An article from Reuters, a spokesperson for Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas denounced Ben-Gvir's visit as a provocation and called on the United States to intervene if it wants to prevent the region from exploding in an uncontrollable manner. The U.S. State Department said Washington was firmly committed to the status quo arrangements at the Jerusalem holy sites, and any unilateral action would be unacceptable. Another Reuters article, this one about the war between Russia and Ukraine, says that Russian forces on Tuesday struck back at Ukrainian troops with missiles, drones, and airstrikes in actions that one senior commander said had halted Ukraine's advance after the biggest attack on sovereign Russian territory since the war began. Thousands of Ukrainian soldiers smashed through the Russian border a week ago in a surprise attack that Russian President Vladimir Putin said was aimed at improving Kyiv's negotiating position ahead of possible talks and slowing the advance of Russian forces along the front. That was from Reuters. At the United Nations in New York City, Russia, who chairs the Security Council, called an informal meeting to hear testimony, as Russia titled it, on crimes of the Ukrainian armed forces and the nationalist battalions. The meeting was chaired by the Russian Deputy Ambassador to the UN, Dmitry Polyansky.
We had to modify our initial plans and to include into our narrative today an account of what happened at the border between Ukraine and Russia exactly a week ago, on August 6. So, in a clear attempt to achieve some kind of a PR victory for Ukraine, whose army is constantly retreating from its fortified positions in the east, set up in 2014 and maintained since then, the Zelensky regime launched on this day an adventurous attack on the bordering Russian regions. This is, by the way, the best rebuffal to all of our international partners who were claiming that the Kyiv regime inclines towards peaceful solutions of the Ukrainian crisis. The response has been given, and it's a clear choice for escalation and military action. Don't tell us afterwards that we didn't warn you about this. The Zelensky junta also tried to provoke and attack Belarus. I believe that my Belarusian colleague will tell us the details later. As for the Ukrainian incursion into the bordering Russian region of Kursk, I will not touch upon here the insane rationale of the agonizing Ukrainian dictator who lost the remnants of his legitimacy back in May. Undoubtedly, this is a move that Ukraine will bitterly regret, as it has trained military reserves being eliminated there as we speak. I will only draw your attention to the methods that the Ukrainian nationalists are using on Russian soil, which are similar to the ones they used in Donbass. Let's watch some videos from the scene. On this video made by local residents, you can see the devastation caused by the drone attack. The asphalt pavement is damaged by shell craters of various sizes and covered with debris. Many buildings, including residential ones, have been significantly damaged. A local says there is neither gas nor electricity in the town. An ongoing attack on a residential building was caught on camera. Photos show damage to the church building as a result of the recent attack. These are just a small fraction of videos providing information about war crimes of Ukraine.
Dmitry Polyansky, Russian Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations at today's informal UN Security Council meeting. Representing the United States there, CJ Pine.
We are here because the Russian Federation has decided once again to use the ARIA formula format of the UN Security Council to try and shift blame onto Ukraine, the victim of Moscow's brutal war, and deflect attention away from the rampant devastation Russia has imposed on a UN member state, Ukraine. There is no question as to which country has committed numerous well-documented atrocities, including war crimes and crimes against humanity on Ukraine's sovereign territory, devastating civilian infrastructure, destroying schools, hospitals, and residential buildings, and forcibly transferring and deporting children. That country is Russia. Our message to Russia's leadership and military who commit war crimes or other atrocities is this: the world is watching, and you will be held accountable. In the judgment of history, Russia's attempts to obfuscate the issue by slandering Ukraine will only bring further shame on the Kremlin and all those involved. We all know the truth of what is happening in Russia and Ukraine. We reject any effort by any country to justify supporting Russia in its clear, ongoing violations of international law, including the UN Charter. There is no excuse for any of us to neglect our collective responsibility to hold Russia accountable. As the United States has said before, the Kremlin must stop its war of aggression against Ukraine and stop using the Security Council to hide the truth about the devastation from Moscow's own actions.
CJ Pine from the U.S. State Department at today's informal UN Security Council meeting called by the chair of the Security Council this month, Russia. Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hyori Tiki said today at a news conference in Ukraine that the cross-border operation was aimed at protecting Ukrainian land from long-range strikes launched from Russian territory, from Kursk, and not to gain more territory for Ukraine.
Unlike Russia, Ukraine has no desire for additional territory. Ukraine is not interested in taking over the Kursk region. Our primary concern is protecting the lives of our people. Unfortunately, Ukraine currently lacks the necessary capabilities to deliver long-range strikes with all the available weapons needed to defend against Russian terror. We continue to press for suitable solutions, but none have been provided yet. Therefore, with the help of the armed forces, it is crucial to liberate these border areas from Russian military contingents that launch attacks on Ukraine or support acts of terror.
Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesperson at a news conference in Ukraine. President Joe Biden told reporters today as he was traveling to New Orleans about Ukraine's advance into Russia. It's creating a real dilemma for Putin, and we've been in direct contact, constant contact with the Ukrainians. That's all I'm going to say about it while it's active. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.